We are continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series. Today we're looking at the 11th ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Edmonton Oilers. What should we expect from them this offseason? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series, looking at the Edmonton Oilers. Now, of course, normally we would have been doing the New York Islanders now, but of course, as I mentioned before as well, we had to skip over the Montreal Canadiens because they're still in the playoffs. I thought it was only fair and right that we do every team's offseason video once their season is officially over, because we don't know how things are going to end, and how they end will largely dictate, I think, how they proceed with their offseason. So it's a lot more challenging to analyze those things. So jumping into the Edmonton Oilers here today, we're going to recap their regular season performance, take a look at some stats, their cap space, take a look at what contracts are expiring as far as their RFAs and UFAs, and then take a look at the top burning questions facing this franchise this offseason. So let's dive in and take a look at their regular season stats. So the Oilers finished with a record of 35-19-2 for 72 points. They finished second in the North Division. Finished with a plus 29 goal differential, so that's a nice result considering that goals against has been an issue for this team in the recent years. They certainly did a better job. Power play was the best in the league, amazing 27.6% efficiency rate, and the PK was pretty solid as well at 82.5. So special teams was not an issue. Dave Tippett really did a good job working with this team to make those improvements here, and they have $21.3 million of salary cap space heading into this offseason, but they do have some interesting choices that they need to make. Now, of course, the Edmonton Oilers bowed out early in the first round at the hands of the Winnipeg Jets with a 4 consecutive game loss, a sweep to the Jets. Not exactly the way they envisioned it after a really solid regular season here. Now let's jump in and take a look next at the contract situation and see what contracts need to be renewed or replaced with that cap space they have available. On the RFA side, we have Jujhar Khaira, we have Dominic Cahoon, Kaylor Yamamoto, Tyler Benson, and Stuart Skinner. So there's nothing there that's going to be overly too expensive. Most of those players, if any, will likely get all short-term deals, would be my guess. Yamamoto might get a little bit more term, but for the most part, I'd expect short-term, anywhere from 1 to 3 year contracts at most for some of these guys, and some of them are going to still be on two-way deals here as well. Now, the UFA side of things for the Oilers is rather interesting. They have Ryan NugentHopkins, who they've been grinding away with here, trying to come up with a solution on a new contract. Obviously, he's been an important piece for them over the years, former first overall pick. We've got Alex Chason, Tyler Ennis, Gaetan Haas, Joakim Nygaard, Patrick Russell. Then on the blue line, you've got Adam Larson, Tyson Barrie, Dmitry Kulikov, Slater Cuckoo, and goaltender Mike Smith. So some tough names there that need to be likely brought back or replaced. So that $21 million is not going to be, it's not going to get them too far. Obviously, NugentHopkins could eat up a big chunk of that. They need to re-sign Mike Smith, which I think is going to be something that definitely takes place here. But what all do they have to do? What are the top most burning questions facing this franchise that they need to address this offseason? We'll jump into that here and now in the next segment. Burning question number 1 to me is, what do you do with the goaltending situation? But first up, you get to buy out Mikko Koskinen. That contract has been bad since the day it was signed, and they cannot have him on the roster any longer. They cannot trust him to get the job done. A buyout at this point is not all that bad when it comes to what it's going to cost them. So to me, you buy out that contract and move him along. Mike Smith, at his age, had a phenomenal season for the Oilers, was a big part of their success. And to me, you bring him back on another short-term contract. You're probably going to have to pay him a little bit more money than the year before because his numbers were drastically better. And then you bring in another goaltender to work with them in a 1A, 1B situation. I think Smith has to kind of keep his games played down a little bit so he doesn't get too tired out. He's not as young as he used to be. There's been a lot of talk that the Oilers have interest in some of the goalies around the league that could be available via trade. Mostly the ones that get the most talk are Columbus, between Elvis Merzlikins or Jonas Korpisalo. So I can see them making a trade for one of those two goaltenders. Would certainly make a lot of sense, and they can work with Smith as a 1A, 1B tandem. To me, that would make the most sense for this goaltending situation going forward. And then when Smith is ready to move on, then they still have a younger goalie here who can take over. And one of the RFAs was Stuart Skinner, who I think they have hopes for to the long term, at least be able to be, at the very least, a backup goalie at the NHL level. Burning question number 2 is, can you get Ryan Nugent-Hopkins signed, or are you going to have to try to replace this guy? Because he's a unique kind of player. Former first overall pick, normally plays center, but can also play the left wing sometimes when he plays with Leon or Connor McDavid. He's a very valuable piece and would be hard to replace. So to me, I don't know what he's going to want in terms of money, but he and the Oilers have been grinding away for a long time here. So the longer this goes on, I think that the odds do tend to decrease that he's going to be back. But still, I think if you're Edmonton, you try your best to get him signed. He's been an important piece. Secondary scoring has been a struggle for this team behind McDavid and Draisaitl. He's one of the few guys who delivers it on a consistent basis. So to me, you need to do what you can to keep him around within reason, of course, depending on what he's demanding for money. If it's a little bit too crazy or ridiculous, you might have to walk away. But preferably, you want him on your roster next year. Burning question number 3 is, what does your blue line look like next year? There's a lot of questions facing the Edmonton Oilers blue line. Oscar Klefbom, who was on LTIR all year long, will he be able to return? I mean, we don't even know the answer to that yet, and we probably won't until later in the offseason. He'll have to give Ken Holland an update saying either he's likely done or he's able to go to training camp and give it a try, and that's going to play a big role in what they do. You've also got Tyson Barrie, who fit in extremely well, was the league's top offensive defenseman for points this year, and might have priced himself out of Edmonton. You've got Adam Larson, who's a free agent. Kulikov likely doesn't come back. He was only brought over as a deadline acquisition. I imagine he moves on. But Larson, there was word that they were getting close on a contract extension as much as 3 or 4 weeks ago. So I think the odds of Larson staying are pretty decent. Tyson Barrie, on the other hand, very well could have priced himself out of town, but thankfully they do have youngsters like Evan Bouchard and Philip Broberg who should be able to step in and provide a similar amount of offense. And if not, if Klefbom can come back, he can also possibly be a guy to help with that as well. But to me, this blue line is definitely going to look different next year for sure. And you also have to wonder is, do they get an extension done for Darnell Nurse? He's only a year away from needing a new contract, and he has played exceptionally well, been a big minute muncher for the Oilers, putting up great numbers. He's really a stud back there, and is a player they would probably prefer to sign long-term and make sure he's a part of the team's future for a long time. But that's something else they need to do, but it's probably going to take a little bit of a back burner to some of these more pressing issues with the guys that need contracts now. I think are more likely to see that get done maybe later into the summertime. And the last burning question here for the Oilers this offseason is, are we going to see some additional buyouts besides goaltender Mikko Koskinen? Personally, I think guys like Kyle Turris and James Neal are highly possible to be bought out this year. We heard Ken Holland say that multiple buyouts were possible. Doesn't mean for sure they're going to do it, but it is something they're considering. And James Neal's a player with over a $5 million cap hit. Clearly hasn't really fit. It's been a healthy scratch at times, and even though he got off to a good start his first season, at this point he seems very much expendable, and they'd really like to be able to reuse that cap space in other areas. So certainly I think there's a chance that could happen, or they find some kind of a swap like they did originally with Lucic, but I'm not sure they're going to be lucky enough to find a similar scenario again that works better for them. And Turris, again, after getting bought out by Nashville, goes to Edmonton. They're hoping he would be that number 3 center, the right shot, can be a versatile guy, can maybe kill some penalties as well, provide some secondary scoring, and he has not lived up to the standard there. He's only making a small amount of money, but he signed a multi-year contract, 2-year deal, and with 1 year left after barely playing and sitting out a lot in the second half of the year in the playoffs, I think there's a real possibility that if they either try to trade him and if they can't find a taker, that they do end up buying him out too. I think there's a real possibility we could see multiple buyouts here from the Edmonton Oilers. But clearly secondary scoring needs to get better, but because of what they have going on, some of these big-time players like Nurse and Barrie and RNH, they have a lot of question marks that they need to find answers for so they can fill out the rest of that roster, and they're going to have to hope that they can get that secondary scoring from some cheaper contracts or some youngsters joining their roster. So hopefully the Oilers can get back on track here and have more playoff success than they did this past year. So let me know your thoughts on what you expect from the Oilers this offseason down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.